Hello, my fear seekers. I'm your fear master. We've all dreamed of those perfect vacations by the sea, with the sound of the waves and the sea breeze caressing us. Beaches can be as terrifying as they are beautiful. Imagine the vastness of the ocean, hiding unknown creatures in its depths. Think about those desolate shores where you might be completely alone, or perhaps not as alone as you think. What happens when the sun sets and darkness covers the horizon? Mysterious lights, whispers in the night, and shadows moving in the distance can turn a paradise into a nightmare. Tonight, I bring you 4 stories that will make you reconsider your next beach getaway. And remember, the next time you think about a beach vacation, you might want to opt for a pool instead. It's safer and far less perilous. The lonely beach. I've always been someone who seeks to escape the bustle of the city and find a bit of peace and tranquility. So when I found a small cabin for rent on a remote beach, I knew I had to go. It was the perfect place, far from everything and everyone, ideal for completely disconnecting. The journey was long and lonely, but when I arrived, the view was spectacular. The cabin was right in front of the sea, surrounded by palm trees and with a white sandy beach that stretched as far as the eye could see. There were no signs of other tourists, which thrilled me even more. The first day was perfect. I relaxed on the beach, read a book, and enjoyed the sound of the waves breaking on the shore. However, everything began to change the second night. I was sitting on the terrace, enjoying the sea breeze, when I noticed some lights in the distance. They looked like flashlights, moving among the dunes. At first, I thought they were other tourists exploring the area, but during the day, the beach remained deserted. The next night, the lights appeared again, but this time they were closer. A chill ran down my spine. I tried not to give it importance and went to bed, but I had a hard time falling asleep. The next day, I found strange marks in the sand near my cabin, as if someone had been walking around during the night. As the days went by, the noises and lights became more frequent. I decided to investigate and followed the lights to a more remote part of the beach. I found traces of an abandoned campsite, an extinguished bonfire, food cans, and a broken tent. The most unsettling thing was the drawings in the sand, human figures with elongated heads and large eyes, arranged in strange patterns. I took some pictures of the drawings with my phone, hoping to make sense of them later. I felt an eerie presence around me, but I brushed it off as my imagination. I tried to remain calm, telling myself it was just a coincidence. That night, the lights came closer than ever. I heard voices whispering my name and footsteps around the cabin. I tried to call the police, but there was no phone signal. Suddenly, someone or something began pounding on the door violently. The bangs were forceful and constant. Terrified, I hid under the bed as the pounding intensified and the lights surrounded the cabin. I could hear whispers and malicious laughter. I decided to block the door with a chair, hoping it would keep whatever was out there from coming inside. The sounds continued for hours, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't understand what they wanted from me. In a moment of desperation, I decided to run. I opened the back door and ran towards the beach. The lights followed me, but I didn't see anyone behind them. The beach, which once seemed like a paradise, had now turned into a nightmare. I stumbled and fell several times, my fear driving me forward. At dawn, everything was silent. Exhausted, I returned to the cabin. There was no trace of the lights or the people who had harassed me during the night. However, I found a note on the door with my name written on it, and a terrifying message. "We are watching you." Without wasting any time, I packed my things and left the cabin. While driving back home, I couldn't stop looking in the rearview mirror, fearing that something or someone was following me. I reached the city and told my friends about my experience, but no one believed me. They laughed it off as a wild story fueled by isolation and an overactive imagination. Back in the safety of my apartment, I tried to convince myself that it had all been a series of misunderstandings and coincidences. I even considered the possibility of local pranksters messing with tourists for fun. But the sense of unease wouldn't leave me. In the days that followed, I tried to return to my normal routine, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I went to bed, I felt as if someone was standing in the shadows, just out of sight. The sounds of the city, which used to comfort me, now seemed distant and hollow. One night, as I was trying to fall asleep, I heard a soft tapping on my window. My heart raced as I cautiously approached the window, pulling the curtain aside. There was nothing there, just the dark cityscape. I told myself it was the wind, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. I started researching the area where the cabin was located. I found old news articles about mysterious disappearances and strange occurrences on that very beach. Locals spoke of ghostly lights and figures that haunted the area. There were even stories about ancient rituals performed by indigenous tribes long ago. The more I read, the more I realized that my experience wasn't unique. Determined to find answers, I decided to visit the local library to dig deeper into the history of the beach. I found a dusty old book that mentioned the beach as a place where supernatural events were reported throughout the centuries. According to the book, the beach was once considered sacred ground, and disturbing it could awaken vengeful spirits. This revelation sent chills down my spine. Could it be that I had disturbed something ancient and malevolent during my stay? The thought was terrifying, but it also provided a possible explanation for what I had experienced. As the weeks passed, the haunting memories of the beach began to fade, but the sense of unease never completely left me. I avoided beaches and isolated places, preferring the safety of crowded, well-lit areas. I couldn't bring myself to delete the photos I had taken of the strange drawings in the sand. They served as a reminder of what I had gone through and a warning to never let my guard down. Even now, years later, I still get chills when I think about that lonely beach. I've shared my story with others, but most people dismiss it as fiction or exaggeration. Only a few have looked at me with understanding, sharing their own tales of inexplicable encounters. The experience changed me forever. It taught me that there are places in this world that we are not meant to disturb, places where the line between reality and the supernatural is blurred. And though I try to live my life without fear, there's a part of me that will always be haunted by the memory of that beach and the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. The beach cabin. Sarah and I decided to rent a cabin on a beach to celebrate our anniversary. We had been together for 3 years, and this trip was supposed to be a romantic escape from our busy lives. The cabin was perfect, isolated and cozy, perched right on the edge of the beach with a stunning view of the ocean. The moment we arrived, we were enchanted by the tranquility and beauty of the place. We spent the first day walking along the shoreline, collecting seashells and enjoying each other's company without the usual distractions of work and city life. As the sun set, we cooked dinner together, laughing and talking about our future plans. That night, we sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore was soothing, and we felt completely at peace. It was the perfect start to our getaway. The next day was just as wonderful. We explored the nearby woods, took countless photos, and even dared to take a swim in the chilly water. As evening approached, we decided to stay in and watch a movie. It was during that second night that things started to feel off. Around midnight, I was jolted awake by a strange noise. It sounded like a faint scratching, almost as if someone was trying to get in. I shook Sarah awake, and she listened with me. The noise seemed to be coming from beneath us. We both felt uneasy, but tried to brush it off as the wind or perhaps some animal outside. However, the scratching persisted, growing louder and more insistent. We couldn't ignore it any longer. Juan, being the brave one, decided to investigate. He grabbed a flashlight and I followed close behind, holding onto his arm. The sound was definitely coming from the floor. We moved the rug in the living room and discovered a trapdoor hidden underneath. It was an old wooden hatch, weathered and dusty, almost as if it hadn't been touched in years. With a mix of curiosity and apprehension, we opened the trapdoor, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. The air that wafted up was cool and musty. Taking a deep breath, we descended the stairs, the flashlight beam cutting through the thick darkness. At the bottom of the stairs, we found ourselves in a small underground room. The walls were lined with shelves holding dusty jars and old books. But what caught our attention were the photographs pinned to the walls. They were old, sepia-toned pictures of people, men, women, and children, who looked like they were from different time periods. There was something unsettling about their expressions, a mixture of fear and resignation. As we examined the photos more closely, we realized they were all labeled with names and dates. The dates spanned several decades, and the last entry was from just a few years ago. A chill ran down my spine. These people had all disappeared in this area. As we continued to look around, we noticed strange carvings on the walls, figures and symbols that looked almost ritualistic. The sense of dread grew stronger. Suddenly, the trapdoor above us slammed shut with a loud bang. We were plunged into darkness, the only light coming from Juan's flashlight. We rushed to the stairs and tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in as we realized we were trapped. We began to hear noises, footsteps above us, slow and deliberate, and then, to our horror, sinister laughter echoing through the underground room. It felt as if we were being watched, toyed with. Desperate, we searched for another way out. Our flashlight beam flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The room felt colder, and the air grew heavier. The laughter grew louder, more mocking. We screamed for help, but our voices seemed to be swallowed by the darkness. As we fumbled around, our hands brushed against a section of the wall that felt different, hollow. Juan pushed against it, and a hidden panel swung open, revealing a narrow tunnel. Without hesitation, we crawled through the tunnel, the sinister laughter still echoing behind us. The tunnel was claustrophobic, and the darkness seemed to press in from all sides. We could hear the footsteps following us, growing closer with every passing second. After what felt like an eternity, we emerged from the tunnel into the cool night air, finding ourselves on the beach a short distance from the cabin. We didn't stop running until we reached the water's edge, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. We looked back at the cabin, its dark silhouette looming against the night sky. We knew we had to leave immediately. There was something evil about that place, something that wanted us to stay forever. We quickly gathered our belongings and drove away, not looking back. It wasn't until we were miles away that we started to feel safe again. Over the next few days, we couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Nightmares plagued our sleep, and we were haunted by the sounds of footsteps and sinister laughter. Determined to understand what had happened, we began to research the history of the cabin and the area. We discovered that the cabin had a dark past. Over the decades, numerous people had rented it, only to vanish without a trace. The locals had their suspicions, but never any proof. Some believed the cabin was cursed, while others thought it was the work of a madman or something even more sinister. The photographs we had seen were of the missing people, each one lured to the cabin just like us. The more we uncovered, the more we realized how close we had come to becoming part of that history. The carvings we saw in the underground room were linked to ancient rituals, possibly to trap or summon malevolent spirits. It explained the strange occurrences and the feeling of being watched. We considered going to the authorities, but without solid evidence, we doubted anyone would believe our story. Sarah and I made a pact never to speak of the cabin again, hoping that by doing so, we could move on with our lives. We tried to resume our normal routines, but the memories lingered. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind brought us back to that night. We couldn't escape the sense of dread that had followed us from that cursed place. In the end, we decided to move away, far from the coast and the memories that haunted us. It was the only way we could think to start anew. Even then, the nightmares persisted. We would wake up in a cold sweat, the echo of sinister laughter still ringing in our ears. It was a reminder that some places are best left undisturbed, and some mysteries are better left unsolved. The cabin on the beach remains a dark chapter in our lives, a place where shadows linger and the past refuses to stay buried. The Ghost Surfer. I was always a passionate surfer, constantly on the lookout for new waves and thrilling adventures. One day, I heard about a beach renowned for its massive waves, but also notorious for being dangerous. This beach, known as Playa de las Sombras, had a dark reputation due to the numerous disappearances and accidents that had occurred there. However, this didn't deter me. On the contrary, I was determined to test my skills in such a challenging place. I arrived at the beach early in the morning, just as the sun was beginning to illuminate the horizon. The waves were incredible, tall and powerful, exactly what I had been searching for. I quickly prepared my gear and launched into the water, exhilarated by the opportunity to surf in such an intense location. That first day was fantastic. I reveled in the waves and the solitude of the beach. There weren't many surfers around, just a few locals who watched me with a mix of curiosity and concern. As the day drew to a close, while I was putting away my board, an old surfer approached me. He warned me about the beach, saying that years ago, a surfer had died there, and his spirit still haunted the waves, seeking company. I brushed off his warning, thinking it was just a local legend, and continued to surf. That night, I camped on the beach, enjoying the sound of the sea and the cool breeze. However, my sleep was disturbed by unsettling dreams. I dreamed of an unknown surfer staring at me from the waves, his eyes dark and empty. The whispers of the wind seemed to call my name, inviting me into the water. The next morning, I found my board covered in seaweed and strange marks, as if it had been dragged along the ocean floor. Ignoring these eerie signs, I went back to the waves. While I was surfing, I noticed a figure on the horizon, a surfer with an old board who seemed to be following me. I tried to get closer, but the figure vanished into the waves. One afternoon, the waves were particularly big and challenging. I was riding the crest of a wave when I saw the ghostly surfer clearly. The figure looked at me with a blank expression and a sinister smile. I lost my balance and fell into the water. As I struggled to surface, I felt something pulling me down. Desperate, I managed to break free and swim to the shore. That night, I decided to confront the ghostly surfer. Under the full moon, I ventured into the sea, hoping to solve the mystery. The waves were violent, and the darkness enveloped me. But I was determined. Suddenly, I saw the figure again, closer than ever. The ghostly surfer stared at me and began to approach. I felt a coldness and a sense of despair wash over me. The figure reached me, and in an instant, I felt the world fade around me. The water turned icy, and the whispers grew louder. I was being dragged toward the bottom of the sea, unable to fight the force pulling me down. I woke up on the shore with the first light of dawn, exhausted and trembling, but alive. The beach was deserted, with no sign of the ghostly surfer. I quickly gathered my things and left the beach, vowing never to return. Days later, while talking with other surfers, I discovered that many had had similar experiences at Playa de las Sombras. Stories of encounters with the ghostly surfer were common, and everyone agreed that something dark and sinister inhabited those waters. I could never forget what I experienced at Playa de las Sombras. Although I tried to resume my normal life, the experience changed me forever. The waves and the sea, which were once my passion, now filled me with fear. The sensation of being watched and the whispers in the wind haunted me, turning my love for surfing into a constant source of anxiety. The memory of the ghostly surfer remained etched in my mind, a nightmare that I could never shake off. Playa de las Sombras was a place that changed everything for me. The adventure I sought turned into a terrifying ordeal that left me questioning my once unshakable love for the ocean. Each time I closed my eyes, I could still see the ghostly surfer's sinister smile and feel the icy grip pulling me towards the depths. It became clear that the beach was cursed, and the legends were more than just stories. They were warnings. Despite my best efforts to move on, the experience lingered. I tried to find solace in the familiar waves of other beaches, but the fear followed me. Every shadow on the water, every unexpected splash made my heart race. I could no longer find the peace I once felt on my board. The ocean, which had been my sanctuary, had become a reminder of that fateful encounter. The stories of other surfers who had faced the ghostly figure did little to comfort me. Some had narrowly escaped like I did, while others were never seen again. The shared tales of terror only solidified the beach's reputation as a place to avoid. Playa de las Sombras had claimed many, and I was one of the lucky few who had survived. In the end, I knew I had to let go of surfing. The risk of encountering the ghostly surfer again was too great. I sold my board and distanced myself from the surfing community. It was a heartbreaking decision, but my fear overshadowed my passion. Life went on, but the shadow of Playa de las Sombras loomed over me. I took up new hobbies, made new friends, and built a different life. But the ocean always called to me. It was a bittersweet melody, reminding me of what I had lost and what I had narrowly escaped. The memory of the ghostly surfer was a scar, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks in the depths of the sea. Years later, I returned to the coast, not to surf, but to find closure. I stood on a cliff overlooking Playa de las Sombras, watching the waves crash against the rocks. The beach looked the same, deceptively inviting, but I knew better. The spirits of those who had vanished were still there, and the ghostly surfer still roamed the waves, waiting for his next victim. As I left, I felt a sense of peace. I had faced my fears and acknowledged the past. The ocean would always be a part of me, but I had learned to respect its power and the mysteries it held. Playa de las Sombras was a place of beauty and danger, a reminder that some adventures are better left unexplored. The ghostly surfer remained a legend, a story whispered among surfers, a cautionary tale for those who dared to challenge the waves. And for me, it was a chapter of my life that had closed, but not without leaving a mark. The sea had changed me, but I had also found strength in my survival. The memory of Playa de las Sombras would always haunt me, but it also reminded me of my resilience and the power of the human spirit to endure even the most terrifying of experiences. The Castaway. My friends and I decided to take a boat trip to explore a deserted island near the coast. We had talked about it for months, imagining the thrill of setting foot on an untouched piece of land. far from the noise and chaos of our daily lives. The island, rumored to be a hidden gem with its pristine beaches and lush greenery, was the perfect destination for our adventurous spirits. On a bright Saturday morning, we set sail, the boat cutting through the calm, azure waters with ease. Laughter and excited chatter filled the air as we navigated toward our destination, eager for a day of exploration and fun. The day unfolded just as we had hoped. We swam in the crystal-clear waters, lounged on the soft sands, and ventured into the thick forest that covered much of the island. The sun blazed overhead, casting a golden hue over everything. It was idyllic, a paradise that seemed to exist just for us. As the day wore on, we gathered driftwood and built a small fire, planning to roast marshmallows and tell stories as the sun set. But as evening approached, the weather took an unexpected turn. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, and the wind picked up, ruffling the calm surface of the sea. Before we could react, a violent storm descended upon us. The sky turned black, lightning cracked, and thunder roared. The waves grew menacing, and our boat, anchored just off the shore, was tossed about like a toy. Realizing we couldn't risk returning to the mainland in such conditions, we decided to seek refuge on the island. The storm raged through the night, pinning us to the beach. We huddled together, drenched and shivering, as rain pelted down and the wind howled around us. It was a stark contrast to the sunny paradise we had enjoyed just hours earlier. Exhausted and cold, we finally managed to find a semblance of shelter in the form of a dense thicket of trees. As the first light of dawn crept through the storm clouds, we surveyed our situation. The storm had passed, but our boat was badly damaged, and it was clear we were stranded. Determined to make the best of it, we decided to explore the island further, hoping to find resources that could help us repair the boat or signal for help. While exploring, we stumbled upon an old, dilapidated shack hidden among the trees. It was a curious sight, seemingly abandoned yet relatively intact. The door creaked ominously as we pushed it open, revealing a cluttered interior. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that penetrated the grimy windows. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. Among the scattered debris, I caught sight of a weathered diary lying on a rickety table. Curiosity piqued. I picked up the diary and began to read aloud. The diary belonged to a man named Andrew, who had been shipwrecked on the island many years ago. Andrew's entries started with detailed accounts of his initial efforts to survive, finding food, fresh water, and building a shelter. But as the days turned into weeks, his writings took a darker turn. He described seeing shadowy figures moving between the trees, hearing disembodied voices whispering his name, and finding strange symbols etched into the sand. Andrew wrote of his growing paranoia, convinced that something was stalking him on the island. We exchanged uneasy glances as I read. The diary's descriptions resonated with our own experiences. The fleeting shadows, the inexplicable whispers, and the ominous marks we had seen on the beach the previous night. A sense of dread settled over us, a realization that we might not be as alone as we had thought. As night fell, the island's eerie ambiance intensified. The once peaceful sounds of nature now seemed sinister. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig set our nerves on edge. We gathered around the fire we had built earlier, the flickering flames casting long, dancing shadows. We tried to brush off our fear with nervous laughter and light-hearted banter, but the tension was palpable. In the middle of the night, we were jolted awake by a blood-curdling scream. It was Mark, one of our friends, and the sound came from deeper within the forest. Grabbing our flashlights, we rushed toward the source of the scream, our hearts pounding with fear. We found nothing but a trail of blood and disturbed sand leading away from our camp. Mark was gone. Panic set in as we followed the trail, the beam of our flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The path led us to the entrance of a cave, its mouth gaping like a black hole. The air inside was cold and damp, and the walls were slick with moisture. With trepidation, we entered, our footsteps echoing in the confined space. The cave was a labyrinth of narrow passages and chambers. As we ventured deeper, we found Mark's belongings, his backpack, flashlight, and even his shoes, scattered across the floor. The walls were covered in the same strange symbols Andrew had described in his diary. A sense of dread filled us as we realized that these markings were not natural. They were a warning, a message left by something that inhabited the island. Suddenly, a guttural growl echoed through the cave, freezing us in our tracks. We shone our flashlights around but saw nothing. The growl came again, closer this time. We turned and ran, stumbling over rocks and slipping on the wet ground. The sense of being hunted was overwhelming. Emerging from the cave, we didn't stop running until we reached the relative safety of our camp. Our breaths came in ragged gasps, and our minds were filled with terror. We knew we had to get off the island, but the storm had damaged our boat, and we had no way to signal for help. Desperation led us to scavenge the island for anything that could help us repair the boat. As we worked, we were constantly looking over our shoulders, feeling the eyes of the island's unseen inhabitant upon us. Time seemed to stretch, each minute a torment as we raced against an unknown enemy. On the third day, just as we were losing hope, a fishing boat appeared on the horizon. I waved frantically, shouting at the top of my lungs. The boat altered its course and approached the island. The fishermen aboard were skeptical of my frantic tale, but seeing my disheveled state, they agreed to take me aboard. I was the only one who made it off the island. My friends were never found. Back on the mainland, my story was met with disbelief. The authorities conducted a search but found no evidence of the mysterious creature or the strange symbols. The island was deemed a place of tragic accidents and left alone. My life was never the same. I was haunted by the memories of my friends' screams and the feeling of being hunted. The island remained a mystery, its secrets buried in the sands and shadows. Despite surviving, I knew I would never truly escape the island's grip. The nightmares, the sense of dread, they followed me, a constant reminder of the terror that lurked just beyond the reach of the known world. And now, my brave fear-seekers, we have reached the end of our chilling journey through the most terrifying beaches. I hope these stories have frozen your blood and stirred your imagination. The next time you feel the sea breeze or hear the crashing waves, remember that even paradises can hide dark secrets. So keep your eyes wide open and your feet on the sand, or perhaps on the safe concrete of a pool. Until next time, when we explore more dark corners of our world and beyond. Sweet dreams, if you can. And remember, there's always something lurking, waiting in the shadows. I'm your fear master, wishing you a peaceful night, or not.